released my finger from the trigger, and then it was over.
What do you mean he's unstoppable? You are superior to him in every way that counts. You are better trained, better equipped. You outnumber him at least 20 to 1. Do your job.
The way I see it, there's two types of people. Those who spend their lives trying to build a future, and those who spend their lives trying to rebuild the past. For too long, I've been stuck in between.
"2001 is perhaps the most important year in gaming. Grand Theft Auto 3, Metal Gear Solid 2, Silent Hill 2, classics, and pivotal titles in their respective genres. Remedy Entertainment reside in Espoo, Finland, and the first game they released was Death Rally in 1996, which I found out was remade in 2011 for the iOS, and even has Barry Wheeler from Alan Wake as a guest star. Death Rally is a top-down vehicular combat game akin to Twisted Metal, and was successful both critically and financially. That success gave the company the confidence to start on their next game. Inspired by Hong Kong action films and noir detective stories, aspiring writer Sam Lake penned the story. The game went through many names, including Max Heat and Dark Justice, before landing on the now iconic and much better moniker, Max Payne. Once shown the concept, publisher Gallery of Developers, or GOD, GOD for short, agreed to help publish the game, and work started in what will become a 5-year development cycle. The game was shown at E3 in 1999 and was released upon the world 2 years later. I remember seeing the cover of this game in magazines growing up. Back then, the internet wasn't as prevalent in my life like it is now, so much of my gaming news came from thumbing through gaming magazines. Looking at the screenshots, at that point I've been into the Matrix and catching the commercials of Max Payne. If I wasn't sold on it before, I was then.
Rockstar Games presents Max Payne, the intense story of a fugitive undercover cop who is framed for murder. A man with nothing to lose. Revolutionary bullet time gameplay slows down the action, showing bullets in flight, giving Max the edge against impossible odds. Prepare for pain. Max Payne. Get it now on PlayStation 2, Xbox, and PC. Rated M for mature.
It also had to be the Rockstar seal of approval, and it was up there with this game features scenes of blood and gore that was made famous in a lot of Capcom games. During the time Max Payne was released, I was unable to play it. My PC was barely holding together and was only good for AOL. I was able to play the not so impactful but still very good Dead to Rights. The similarities between the two games is so obvious, and one of the first clear signs of the influence Remedy's title would have on the industry. It wasn't until I got my first original Xbox on Christmas of 2003, and it happened to coincide with my interest in more mature entertainment. GTA had taken the world by storm at this point, and having an Xbox allowed me to finally experience both GTA 3 and Vice City. With both GTA games under my belt, I was finally able to visit Max Payne for the first time. I rented it on a Friday and played all the way throughout the weekend. I remember not really grasping it due to me not really understanding the nuance of storytelling. I mean, I thought Freddy vs. Jason was the peak of cinema. It was still a good time until I got to the first nightmare level and completely gave up. For as much as I claimed me loving horror back then, that level was so unsettling to me. I remember being creeped out by the blood trails and the vast void beyond them. Also not really fully understanding what I needed to do, so I ended up dropping the game.
No, please God, no.
I was able to return to it years later. At this point, I had watched many of the films I aspired at. After powering through that nightmare level, I was able to experience a true pioneer of the action genre. Max Payne plays like an arena shooter from that era. Gameplay is frantic, and the constant danger of always being 1 or 2 shots away from death keeps tensions high. To heal, there is no first aid kit. Instead, you will be raiding medicine cabinets for painkillers to chomp on. All of this is enhanced by the game's main hook, and the thing that's most remembered by: bullet time. The first instance of slow motion in video games that I could find was Requiem Fallen Angel. It was developed by Cyclone Studios and published by 3DO. I've never played it, but looking at footage you can see the first seeds of the idea take shape. If you play this game, I'd love to hear how it is. This ability helps to tip the scales more in your favor. Bullet time can either be initiated by performing a shoot dodge or by pushing the bullet time button, which is the right bumper on the Xbox, but can be mapped to anywhere on the controller. The gameplay loop of going into a room, diving all over the place, and seeing bullets whiz by Max's head is very gratifying, and the guns themselves give good feedback. And seeing visible squibs of blood spurt out of enemies after you turn them into Swiss cheese is such a great visual, and acts as the indicator that you hit your mark and the enemy is down. The game's arsenal is varied enough. You get the standard pistol, shotguns, machine guns, each of varying strength and utility. I stuck to the dual engrams for most of the game until I got the Colt Commando. I wish shotguns were more practical. The rate of fire was too slow and didn't work with clearing the out rooms of enemies even with the automatic shotgun, which you get late in the game. The machine guns are bullet hoses. Pointing these things at a general direction of an enemy usually gets the job done. The gameplay loop is so simple, but it works so well. The gunplay is done at such a high level. The game is brutal, so not overwhelming. The player with options was smart. The game is difficult both because of Max's vulnerability and sometimes cheap enemy placement. Don't get used to running past corners because some dudes will be hiding waiting to blow you away. If you aren't quick saving every few rooms, be prepared to lose a bit of progress for that mistake. Trial and error can be good in the game, like Hotline Miami is a good example of that, where death can help you recognize enemy patterns, and there is quite a bit of that in here. Just make sure to make friends with the quick save feature. When I would get paranoid about any new encounter, I was going to the menu and hitting that button so quick. This can kind of sort of ruin the flow. Stopping to save every room can be a bit much, and I can understand why a first time player or a person coming back would do this. I played this game on the Xbox Series S, and changing weapons on the controller can be tough, especially if you are in a pinch. This kind of forced me to stick to one or two guns. I can see how this is not a problem on the PC, but if you plan on playing this on controller, just be aware of that. Max Payne is about 6 or 7 hours long, and that is perfect. I'm so tired of games being huge time sinks, so to have something I could beat in a few settings is so refreshing. Visually, the game still holds up. Environments and textures have of course begun to show its age, but it still oozes style and grit. Remedy employees took thousands of pictures in New York City and were accompanied by former NYPD officers to get the more seedy areas of the city, and that commitment shows. Max will be blasting through his way through dirty streets and alleyways. Mob hideouts and corporate offices all fit too well to the game's themes, and most importantly fun to mess around in. Fire looks good, and seeing bullets trajectory during bullet time adds such a cool sense of style and helps to enhance shootouts. The faces, however, pull off that GoldenEye photo-realistic look to them, with varying levels of quality, most notably Max himself, portrayed famously by head writer Sam Lake. If you're around during this time, you most definitely seen this smug mug. In an objective sense, yes, this choice is laughably bad, but I don't know, there's such a great charm to it, and to this day, fans look back fondly at this first iteration of the character. It's also great to see Sam Lake embrace his role even more, and having him make a return in Alan Wake 2. Remedy also felt this engine wouldn't be able to convey the complex story it wanted to tell, so to save money, they created the comic book panels that have become so iconic to the series. Using the photos they took from their trip to New York and help from friends and family, many Remedy employees stood in for the game's characters, and their pictures were put through a filter to help bring the games to life. Many of these comic panels have such a charming feel, intentional or not, it helps to give such a heavy, dark game a good sense of levity. On the audio side, this game's soundtrack is pretty good. The main theme has become so iconic, but outside of that, it's hard to find another track that stands out. For playing this game, I forgot how many songs sound like they would fit in films like The Matrix or The One. The sound effects are done very well. Guns themselves sound loud and powerful. A good shout out goes to the shotgun. I can literally feel the stock in my shoulder whenever I pop this thing off.
Open up! Let me in, quick!
Not so fast. The password. John who?
Come on. Okay, John Woo.
All right. Come right in.
It's a trap! It's Payne!
voice acting is pretty good across the board. Shout out to Jeff Gruner, who voiced Jack Lupino, that crazy Satanist in the Ragnarok Club.
I've tasted the devil's green blood. It runs in my veins. I've seen beyond a world of skin, the architecture of blood and bow and arrow. Death is coming! She is coming, and hell follows with her. This is the twilight winter. I am ready to be her son. Her time is now, and all who stand in her way must die!
One performance that stands head and shoulders above everything else is from James McCaffrey, who voices Max himself. Some of the lines in this game can be so overly written and poetic, it comes off as comical if you read them aloud to yourself. But voice to McCaffrey's stoic performance gives him a sense of gravitas. He just brings it, and it is, in my opinion, maybe aside from the main theme, the most iconic piece of audio from the original game.
Collecting evidence had gotten old a few hundred bullets back. I was already so far past the point of no return, I couldn't even remember what it looked like when I had passed it. You piece together a jigsaw, and the final picture is you finishing that same puzzle. A mad, green-eyed killer standing behind you. An urban legend come true.
The story of Max Payne is one of revenge. I forgot how hard this intro sequence hits, and it happens so quickly as well. If this was a modern game, this intro would have been like an hour long with some mandatory walking sequence where Max is wounded or something. But no, Remedy throws you right into the action. You gun down the junkies who did this to Max. And then the story delves into the inner workings of the New York criminal underworld. And in most noir stories, the conspiracy goes all the way to the top. I won't get into details as the remake is just around the corner, and I want people to experience the story for themselves, but it is a really good one and one of my favorites in gaming. Max Payne's influence on third-person shooters is undeniable. Back then, we only had games like Tomb Raider or Jet Force Gemini, which were all still good in their own right and deserve to be remembered as such, but they still lacked the fluidity of movement achieved by Remedy. Max Payne was a huge success and put Remedy on the map, and I know it already got the attention of Rockstar Games, who back then were riding high off GTA 3. They would help to publish the game on the Xbox and PlayStation 2, which helped the game to sell 4 million copies overall. And these numbers persuaded Take-Two Interactive, Rockstar's parent company, to purchase the rights from Remedy for about $34 million in 2002. This sale came with an agreement that Remedy would create the next installment, and work got started on the follow-up. And we didn't have to wait another 5 years before it saw the light of day. With the backing of Rockstar, this allowed Remedy to make a more ambitious sequel. Sam Lake, the game's writer, started studying screenwriting in Finland. And with this added education and the first game's experience under his belt, Sam came back with a script that was 4 times as long as most movies. This time, Max would find himself stewing in the emptiness in what achieving revenge leaves within a person. In this, he finds solace in Mona Sachs, a character who shows up sporadically in the first game, but whose presence in the sequel helps to bring Max back into another spiderweb of lies, deceit, and leaving hundreds of bullet casings in his way. I remember seeing the Game Informer cover story. The August 2003 issue had the Max Payne 2 cover story. At this point, I was about 4 months away from getting an Xbox, but I was still intrigued by this game, and the screenshots captured in this issue looked like something I need to get my hands on. I did eventually get to play Max Payne 2 even before playing the first one. It was one of those games that kept on my mental checklist whenever I headed to my local Blockbuster. At that point, I was so familiar with it from reading the Game Informer article that it was so cool to see those screenshots I had been staring at for months finally come to life. Looking back, I don't think I ever played a third-person shooter that refined before. The gameplay has stayed pretty much intact. Remedy went with the motto, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. And that was a smart choice. Max throws darts around rooms spraying everything in sight. The shoot dodge has seen an improvement since the first game. It seemed Max were barely got off the ground, and it didn't cover much space. This time around, he really takes off in the air, and you're given a lot more airtime. And when you land, you can hold the shoot button, and Max stays on the ground until you stop. This mechanic was a solid addition, and came in handy in a pinch, and helped to avoid any cheap hits, although they still sometimes happen. The biggest addition is Bullet Time 2.0. In this new version of the mechanic, Max can activate slow-mo, and with each kill, time moves even slower, basically turning him into a superhero. And the fact that this refills after each kill means you can stay in bullet time for way longer than the first game. In the first one, I had to use bullet time in bursts, since it didn't last too long. Max Payne 2 has been clearing out whole rooms, fully embracing the power of fantasy and changed the pace of combat, making conserving bullet time not an issue. Because of this, the game almost doubles the enemies you will be facing, giving them better guns and being more liberal with their grenade use. But I found most of my deaths were because I was being reckless and not aware of where enemies were. The presentation has also improved this time, hiring actors to stand in for the comic book panels instead of friends and family. These panels themselves have improved. They remind me a bit like the Hellblazer comics. The constipated, disgruntled Sam Lake was replaced by the regularly handsome Timothy Gibbs. And I do like this change. As much as I love the original look, my personal favorite must be Kathy Tong. Seeing his absolute babe back then when I was 13 hit like a bomb, especially after a certain moment in the story. I can definitely understand why Max goes the lengths he does. The game also has a lot more in-engine cutscenes, which of course have not aged as well as comic panels, but they get the job done and move the story forward. The physics got a huge upgrade. I love seeing the dudes react to gunfire if you shoot them in a certain points in their body. They react accordingly, and you can even juggle enemies in the air. I did get some funny oddities while playing with this mechanic, where enemies will become gummified. The environments are also well done. New York looks as grimy as ever, and we do get more variety in level design. A favorite of mine is the funhouse, which you go back to multiple times. The bigger budget was put into good use this time around. This game was a powerhouse at the time of its release, and despite being over 20 years old, it still holds up very well. The soundtrack fits so well into the narrative. The first game had the memorable theme, but the rest of the music just didn't hold up in my opinion. The tracks here really sell a noir story meshed together with comic panels. A great standout is Mona's theme. It achieves the air, mystery, and danger she exudes, and Late Goodbye by Post the Fall, which plays during the credits and can be heard hummed by various characters, is perhaps the most dad rock song ever put into a game, but it's still pretty good.
It's a late goodbye. Hey, hey!
James McCaffrey is still great as Max. You can hear McCaffrey become more comfortable in the role. He sells every line so well and breathes more life to the character that was already done exceptionally well in the previous game.
They were all dead. Love kills. Did I love her? Was there a choice? The past is a gaping hole. You try to run from it. The more you run, the deeper, more terrible it grows behind you. Its edges yawning at your heels. Like all the bad things in my life, it started with the death of a woman. I couldn't save her.
You press 3 for Mona. Hi, this is Mona. What's your name?
I just need someone to talk to.
Honey, this is a phone sex line. All we do is talk.
Right. How do you fix something like that? How do you make amends? I thought it would help, but it only made it worse.
Just give me your credit card number and I can listen to you all night.
Killing them all only made it worse. It didn't bring them back.
Hey, what are you, some kind of weirdo?
Sorry.
Wendy Hoops voices Max, and that sultry voice is fantastic. She plays the Stone Cold Killer so well, and when she does crack over her love for Max, hits even harder.
God, I turned out to be such a damsel in distress.
Honorable mentions go to Fred Berman as Vinny Incogniti. His performance brings out so much of the over-the-top elements of the previous game.
No, Payne, not you! Why does this keep happening to me? Payne, you gotta help me. There's a freaking bomb in here. If I take the head off, it blows. Bye-bye, Vinny. You're a freaking cop. You gotta help me.
How did this happen?
Rod Houston voices Dick Justice, the fictionalized version of Max, if he starred in a blaxploitation series. The lots of dialogue you hear are so funny and manage to stand out amongst a sea of great voice actors and quotable lines.
No! Oh, no, God! Jared, baby! No!
Stranded in the dark and violent night, Dick Justice,
A lone, hard-boiled fugitive cop, framed for the murder of his wife, on a quest for vengeance through the criminal underworld in the city's heart of darkness. The rain was coming down like all the angels in heaven had decided to take a piss at the same time. In a situation like mine, you can only think in metaphors. They had killed the love of my life. They were going to pay.
The story of Max Payne 2 delves deeper into the moral ambiguity of revenge and the damage it can leave on people. The first game had a great narrative, but everything was black and white, which worked well and was exactly what that game needed. Sam chose to play with the gray moral conundrums of noir stories. This finds Max in a more inner conflict and problems he just can't stop with bullets. However, there is plenty of that. The web of intrigue is strong as returning characters show up and the threads that were left hanging in the first game get resolved. It feels like a more organic sequel in that regard. I always kind of found the love story of this game sort of rushed at first. It all sort of happens quickly, even if you take the time they spent together in the first game. It wasn't until I started to look deeper and start to see this romance for what it is. It's two people bonded over shared experiences, both wrapped up in the grief and anger. I don't think Max and Mona know what they're doing either, and instead are going by their emotional instinct, which drives so much of this story. In that regard, the love story succeeds. Mona does care deeply for Max, and vice versa, often going to great lengths to keep each other safe. She does a great job at being the other side of the coin in the story, and is great equal for Max. The rest of the story is once again full of secrets and portrayals to uncover and experience. Sam Lake wrote a great follow-up to the first game, and it's a great step to take Max. As previously mentioned, the script for this game was way longer than the first game, but it doesn't feel like it. There is no filler and makes each level and Mona fight through have impact. Max Payne 2 is a sequel done right. Replaying this game years later, I was surprised once again how well this holds up. If I had to nitpick, I'd say the game's length is an issue. Even if I had another 6 hours of this, I don't know if it would be remembered as fondly. I am already swamped with sprawling RPGs and open worlds. It takes 60 plus hours to complete, so this was a breath of fresh air, and I'm personally happy with the length. It does what every sequel strives to do, which is improve from its predecessor, and did that and more.
This place is great, really comfortable. I'm just gonna get settled in. Time to move on. Get on with my life. Yes, absolutely.
Despite being a critical success, Max Payne 2 did not live up to Rockstar's expectation when it came to sales numbers. Selling an estimated 2 million copies, which is no small number, but Rockstar's parent company, Take-Two, decided that wasn't good enough, and put the series on ice for the time being. For years, Max Payne went on hiatus, but there were always whispers of Max Payne 3 in some sort of development. It wasn't until July 2009 when Max traced the cover of Game Informer rocking a whole new look. I remember the controversy of this reveal. Max was looking like he played guitar for Slayer. The setting was also saw a big change from the dark, dingy streets of New York to the sun-soaked metropolis of Sao Paulo, Brazil. The biggest and most damning reveal in that article was that they weren't even going to cast James McCaffrey as Max.
God damn it!
Rockstar and Quiver were chosen to develop the sequel. They were studio behind the cult classic Bully. Don Houser chose to have Vancouver create Max Payne 3 instead of Bully 2. Imagine a sequel to Bully with the power and budget that Max Payne 3 got. The project would turn out to be bigger than the studio could handle. Eventually, more of Rockstar's resources were needed to help see the game to completion. In January 2010, a letter titled The Wives of Rockstar was made public by various gaming publications. The letter cites extreme crunch by both Rockstar San Diego and Vancouver. 14 and 16-hour days working 6-7 days a week. We will later see the same sentiments repeated years later during Red Dead Redemption 2's release cycle. The studio was put in a pressure cooker, and it seemed like this game ballooned to something a lot bigger than Rockstar could have ever imagined. Costing $100 million, it is one of the most expensive games at the time. Looking back at the Game Informer article, Max was even cast, so to expect a turnaround time of only 5 months was really insane. That budget mentioned earlier shines through with the game's presentation. Even after a decade since its release, this game looks incredible. Max himself is perhaps one of the best looking game models ever put into a game, and his appearance changes throughout the story, and each one looks really good. The environments are also full of the signature attention of detail Rockstar commits into its open world sandboxes, this time more contained and focused. Office cubicles explode during gunfights, and I was always stopping to look at those skylines. The slow motion camera from the previous games returns, showcasing when you have killed the last enemy in each encounter. A big talking point around this game's release was the visual flares and filters that are all over the many cutscenes. I didn't mind them during my first playthrough around the game's release, but once I went back to the first 2 games and during this recent playthrough, I could understand why this was such a point of contention. I can appreciate them trying to invoke some of that style from the past comic panels. I do like that they did their own spin on it, and were obviously inspired by shows like 24 and the film Man on Fire. The overall cinematic quality is still very well executed. I love the seamless transition from cutscene to gameplay. I played through these games at least 6 or 7 times, and each time these moments happen, they are just so good as the first time.
I'm Don Max. Sir, let us handle this. You stay in your office, lock yourself in. Do not answer the door unless you know it's me. Let's go.
I should be able to override the system if I could just get to the server room.
What's going on?
Nothing to worry about. Everything's fine. Get down behind the desk. Now, both of you.
There are many gripes, and rightly so, on the visual side. But I do like the overall design and gives the game its own identity. The audio, however, is perhaps the best gaming has to offer, or at least in the running. The soundtrack was scored by noise rock band Health. Their blend of pounding drums and synth mixed with ambient guitar melodies. It's a great mix you wouldn't think would work well in the context of a Max Payne game, but Rockstar once again defies logic. Many of these tracks are somber, really underlying the constant depression Max is in, and they ratchet up their making gunfights more frantic. My favorite is when the action is going all out, but the soundtrack remains subdued. A standout to me is Sahel's rendition of the original main theme during the opening credits. Of course, you never fail to bring up the airport section of this part of the game. It would have been great otherwise, but the inclusion of the track Tears just ups the ante. It's so good. James McCaffrey is Max Payne, and I am glad everyone at Rockstar got to their senses and hired him back in the role. He fully embodies Max, this time doing full motion capture and finally serving as the face of Max after all these years. And this performance is really incredible. For me, it's one of the best voice acting performances ever put into a game.
I wouldn't know right from wrong if one of them was helping the poor and the other was banging my sister.
Drinking? Bet your ass I was. You try staying in there for 5 minutes sober. But I ain't slipping, man. I'm slipped. I'm a bad joke. Who wants to take a shot? You see what this is? Come on, anybody? Want to be a hero? I got nothing to lose. Let's do it.
Que porra que tá acontecendo aqui?
Senor Neves.
What the fuck is your problem, man?
My problem? My problem? Wanna know what my problem is? You're turning humans into glue. That's what my fucking problem is!
I don't know what you're talking about, American. All I know is what I hear about you. You bodyguard for the Brancos. They are all dead. You help the poor. Today, many of them dead. You are a proper American hero.
At least I fucking tried.
Well done with your effort. The whole city is grateful. The great American savior of the poor.
That's right.
You think you made any difference? You think stopping this legitimate business venture is helping anyone?
Legitimate? You're stealing people's organs!
We pay for everything. We have the records.
Oh, so people can sell their livers? Their hearts? Their eyeballs? You're insane, you sick fuck!
We kept people safe in the city. Decent people. Safe. I know a lot of powerful people.
Well, your powerful people aren't gonna help you out of this one, buddy.
Every line is delivered so well, showcasing Max's weariness and dry humor. He has always been a big talker in the series, but without a doubt, he has the most dialogue in the third entry, and each line never feels phoned in. It is truly incredible, and one of the reasons why I come back to this game so often. No one else could have done a better job. I'm glad that McAfee finally got to embody a character that is so closely tied to him. The rest of the cast does a good job. I wish we did get over-the-top performance like a Vinny Gognitti or Vladimir Lem, but given the nature of the story, I feel that perhaps that would have felt a bit out of place. There were tons of dialogue spoken in Portuguese. Rockstar sent a team down there, and did their best to incorporate authentic phrases and sounds from the region. Again, the Rockstar attention to detail shines through. Even though I don't understand most of it,
Haven't you figured out I don't speak your fucking language?
the ungodly man hours and the blood, sweat, and tears it took to create such a juggernaut in gaming is on full display. Rockstar took the series from a little stage production with a bunch of friends to a multi-million-dollar blockbuster. Max Payne 3 continues the Hong Kong action roots the series was birthed from. Bullet time is still a marquee feature, and it plays more like the first title. No longer does it stack up with every kill, Max gets burst of it. Bullet time also doesn't replenish on its own. Instead, you gotta shoot enemies outside of it or get shot at yourself. I really do like this change. It encourages the player to pick off enemies, immediate threats, or easy kills, and use that bullet time to take out the tougher guys. The last game had me bullet time so much of the time that I really leaned on that mechanic a little too hard, because it was so overpowered. So to have it dumbed down was a cool change of pace, and allowed me to think about what I can do to dwindle the enemies out of slow motion. The shoot dodge is also back, and I think it's the best it's been. I was using his ability a lot more often than the previous two. Max gets more time in the air to pick up his shots, and when landing, he can stay on the ground. This made me think about where I was going to land in relation to any enemies, and I'll activate bullet time to take off anyone I miss while on my back. It was a cool little touch that keeps action flowing. The biggest change is that Max can fly and take cover. This has been a point of contention amongst fans. Max Payne 1 and 2 were essentially PC arena shooters, but in a third-person perspective. In that regard, constant movement and a spray and pray approach was key. So to have Max essentially become Marcus Phoenix changes up that core gameplay. I made a conscious effort at trying to play Max Payne 3 how you would play the older titles. And sometimes it worked, other times I got turned to Swiss cheese. I think the game is balanced enough to keep both styles in mind. It was fun trying to figure out when I can go Chow Yun Fat mode or not. Although there is a few times where cover is the only viable option due to enemies being far away, or if the game decides to throw an overwhelming amount of goons, that anything other than the patient approach spells trouble. This leaves much of the improvisation of the earlier games not so prevalent. Each level also has its own set of weapons that will be available to you. Max can only carry 2 sidearms and a heavy weapon. This can sorely limit your options if that level only has enemies carrying AKs and revolvers. They do have that perfect sense of weight and impact, and seeing the results of the damage never gets old. I did miss Max having unlimited pocket space and being able to choose between the 3 different variants of machine guns or shotguns in any given level. That gave you options on how to approach encounters. Although at certain points the game gives you the most powerful weapons, and there is no reason to go back unless you did want to see how a level will play out if you use a shotgun instead of an assault rifle. Max also can't throw grenades, however your enemies can. You can shoot them out of the air if you're quick enough, but a dedicated grenade button would have been fun to have. There is a grenade launcher and barrels to shoot and environments to interact with, but these are infrequent, and I would forget about them because they don't stand out enough. We gamers need the big obnoxious barrels that are choked for a reason. Max is older in its entry, and his movements showcase the 9-year difference between games. Rockstar incorporates a Euphoria engine that powered GTA 4, which is good for realistic movements. With its engine, Max has more weight. When you shoot dodge, make sure the coast is clear, since Max will crash into any objects in his way. When I say crash, I mean it. Rockstar really did a good job of making sure you feel each impact. I know this is more realistic, and it does look cool, but damn if it didn't cause some frustrating deaths. Max needs to take a beat to get up on my dive. Often bracing a leg, and this animation alone has caused me so many deaths. I wish it was faster, or at least still let me shoot while getting up. Something that helps balances out the last man standing mechanic. This lets Max shoot the enemy that dealt the killing blow and letting him come back from death. This can only be used if you have a painkiller on hand. For the most part, this works well, but there are some times where the dude is behind some wall or you're out of ammo, so you're just forced to just watch this death animation play out until you can finally try again. This game is also very cutscene heavy, and there are interspersed in each level between encounters. These cutscenes are well made and are a treat to watch on the first playthrough, but can hinder repeat playthroughs. The last thing to mention is the on-rail sections, which are just a spectacle for spectacle's sake, and just fun to experience. My favorite is the bus sequence in Chapter 10. It's big and dumb and unserious, but I don't care, it's fun and I love it. And who doesn't love fun? I also really enjoy that a headshot finishes enemies, which makes precise shooting more critical. Each encounter feels great, seeing dudes tumble over or the more armored enemies react to gunfire is great. And the game still offers a ball-busting challenge. It's not the hardest out of the three, I'll give the honor to the first game, but it continues the tradition of being a game that is good at killing you. It is the longest game, clocking in around 8 to 10 hours and with multiple difficulties, collectibles, and challenges to complete, if you decide to do so. The core gameplay Remedy created is still here. It's just been Rockstarified, for better and for worse. The game's story has seen its fair share of criticisms amongst fans. The setting, in particular, has received tons of flack, and I get it. New York is probably the go-to setting when it comes to noir detective stories. And if Rockstar had kept to New York, you wouldn't hear any complaints from me. This entry has been described by fans as a disconnect from the series, and that point hasn't been more appropriate to me until I got ready to make a video about this series. The first two games had some of the most quotable lines, and was really a bright example of how far video game writing can go. Max Payne 3 still has some great lines, but I can hear the rockstar-ness of it all. Rax curses more in this game than he ever did in the first two games combined.
Did a great job watching after Rodrigo Bronco.
Fuck you.
However, I don't hate the move to Sao Paulo. I always enjoyed the Fish Out of Water story. Although I like the setting of a traditional noir story, all the backstabbing, double-crossing, and dubious characters are all here. I enjoyed unweaving the spiderweb of characters and motives, and the game does go to dark places. Max gets dragged out of his home in New York, Jersey because he got a bit too trigger-happy in a bar one night. But luckily, an old friend came to him with a job offer, and seeing no other choice, takes him up on it. Max ends up working security for the Broncos, a wealthy family in the dangerous city of Sao Paulo, Brazil. A place where people like that will always have targets on their back. He is also battling crippling alcohol and painkiller addiction. After playing through the previous games and seeing all the punishment he goes through, not just emotionally but physically, I can imagine he's in tons of pain all the time. In the second game, he gets shot in the head and falls down a few stories. I would need some whiskey after that too. The game does a good job at showcasing the loneliness of alcoholism, all within an intro cutscene. You see Max arriving and unpacking his things, looking to move on until he stumbles upon a picture of his family, then immediately goes to buying a bottle of scotch, downing the whole thing. It's a very raw portrayal, and he is seen doing this after almost every mission in the game, drowning his sorrows until he vomits and goes to sleep. It is an unglamorized look at addiction that we don't see much at all in AAA games. There are times where the story does spiral too much into the rabbit hole and can lose you if you aren't as invested, and there are some scenes where Max does some straight up dumb stuff just to keep the plot moving, but I don't know, I still enjoy it. Or if I'm just too invested in Max as a character, or if I'm just having a good time. I have a soft spot for Max. I want to see him pull himself out of the mud. He is still a cynical, self-deprecating, miserable person, even more so this time. But I don't know, there is something endearing about it, and he keeps that dry sense of humor, and many of his lines still make me chuckle. Although I was never a big fan of how they dismissed the second game, we get a passing mention of Mona and an Easter egg of Winterson, but that's about it.
We've been married a short time. By now, she had been dead longer than I knew her. I still hadn't really forgiven myself for the Mona business, but I knew that was just grief. The insanity that comes with losing the life you had built.
In the end of the second game, it seemed like Max had found peace and closure about his family. I could see how that would negate the need for a third game altogether. The rationale I always come back to was that depression isn't that simple. That perhaps there was a good period where he was really trying to get better, but perhaps there was a moment that brought him back down. Or maybe he was just simply lying to himself. It makes Max's struggle sadder because he was so close to some sort of peace, but it slipped through his fingers. I did read the comic written by both Sam Link and Dan Houser that came out around the time the game's release, and it's pretty good, but very, very short. I finished it in like 20 minutes. There is some backstory of Max's upbringing and his time in NYPD before and after Max Payne 1, and acts as a good supplement material to the game. It just needed a bit more meat on that bone. Max Payne 3 is still a story worth experiencing, especially if you're a fan of the first two games. I believe it keeps the spirit of those games in the setting, it's just an added cool twist to it. Max probably did need a third game, but damn, I'm glad it exists. At the time of this recording, a full remake of both Max Payne 1 and 2 are in production. A release date or trailer is yet to be shown. With the role that Remedy has been on lately, I'm excited to see their take on the franchise after all these years, and a lot of success and experience they have achieved in the 20 years since Max Payne 2. A remake to me was always the move to make. I don't know if I want to see a Max Payne 4 where Max is even older and more beaten down. A part of me likes to think he is still on that beach enjoying the sunset every day and drinking his nice sodas. Max Payne's cheap third-person action and bullet time has been a staple of action games for 2 decades, thanks to the boys at Remedy. I'm happy I got to experience these games at their peak, and to see how Max Payne's journey through the night left such a lasting impression. Lastly, I'd like to thank James McCaffrey for bringing Max Payne to life, and leaving such an impact. Whatever the series becomes, it'll never be the same without his voice and talent. Thank you, James, and thanks for watching.